Welcome to Big Hearted Indy, where we empower men in Indianapolis to forge deep connections and impactful lives through authentic friendships and service. Join us as we explore personal growth, community leadership, and the transformative power of living out our faith. This podcast is produced by Citizen 7, and it is hosted by Greg Enas, Don Palmer, and I'm Chris Spangle. And today our guests are Andrew Green and Brittany Keno. Andrew is with Shepherd Community Center, and Brittany is with the Edna Martin Christian Center. And they have a partnership that we're going to be talking a little bit about today. But I want to start with Don. Don is going to set up the conversation and explain why we're having these two great organizations and the individuals representing them here to talk today.
I love the quote. Yeah, I'm an old car salesman. But there was a guy named Charlie T. Jones, which standed for Charlie Tremendous Jones. Yeah, love to have a middle name, Tremendous. I guess you'd have to live up to it. But he had a quote that said, "We are the same people in 5 years as we are today, with the exception of the books you read and the people you meet." Mm-hmm. And probably 25 years ago, someone told me, probably Mike Smith, said, you need to meet Jay Height. And I would just encourage folk, when people say, hey, you ought to meet somebody, go ahead and say yes. So I met Jay, got to know Shepherd, really loved what he was about, his heart, his calling to a neighborhood. He's just totally committed. He's sold out for that Near East Side neighborhood. Barato Brett, who runs the Edna Martin Christian Center, and I served on the KIP board, the school board. And a guy named David Mann, who's part of our Citizen 7, introduced me to KIP and said, you need to know KIP. And Greg and I volunteered at KIP. Really kind of helped, was the start of Citizen 7, as we thought we need to make this available to more men, deepen our service, and deepen our friendships. So we're talking today about a unique fund, a barrier-busting fund, a job barrier-busting fund. And I serve on the Goodwill board, and they have a barrier-busting fund. And I thought, such a great idea. Why shouldn't we do something in Citizen 7 to see with their people we could raise some money to cut down the barriers and to really, if we're going to help people help themselves, by gosh, with some small money, we can make a huge difference. So Greg was the implementer. Greg has shepherded this thing, and I'll turn it over to Greg from here.
Thanks, Don. Don, you failed to mention that you were the first awardee of Legacy High School, the KIP High School that they founded on the Edna Martin property there at 23rd and Ralston. You were the first awardee for their Founders Legacy Award. And I remember that celebration and what you've meant to that school, not only KIP and mentoring and the board, but also that particular footprint and all of our lives. I just want to thank you. And if I can just wish you a happy birthday. That's my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Don says he's 25 years old. I think he's 21.
I have to be more honest. I'm actually 49 years old.
Okay, there you go. This is all about authenticity. Well, Don did mention that he and I were given 15 fifth, sixth, and seventh graders when Alicia Johnson was the principal at the KIP Middle School there at Millersville Road and 42nd, and that really forged our friendship. And Citizen 7 really embodies that. Friendship in mission, on mission together. And that's where guys really do form bonds of friendship in the trenches. We are blessed today, though, to have a woman with us. And so this is a special treat to have. Mostly we just have guys doing this, but it's great to have Brittany and Andrew here. And I'll just explain a little bit of what we did at Citizen 7, then turn over to Brittany to introduce yourself, and then to Andrew. We raised a little bit over $100,000. Some really wonderful donors came to the table and said this barrier-busting idea that Don learned from Goodwill and then brought into the Citizen 7 ecosystem. And that money was parlayed into 3 tranches, somewhat aligned with this ABC notion of A, get any job. Get any job. B, get a better job. And C, find a career, hopefully. And we're into our third allocation, into our third tranche of that $100,000 investment. And this is a really beautiful time. I wanted you guys to come in because we've sort of gone through the ABCs, and you've been tracking in particular just a handful, but a powerful handful of people who've moved from any job through a better job into now what looks like a career. And you've both approached it differently. Citizen 7 has not imposed any rigor apart from the fact we want you to press in, and you're already doing that. And your partnership, we're going to talk about today between the two centers, because that's what's novel. Oftentimes, organizations compete for what they think is limited resources, time, talent, and treasure. This is an example where the pie and the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. So with that, Brittany, I'd just like to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, your family, and Andrew, do the same, and then we'll talk a bit more specifics.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me, to be in this space. It's been a great 2 years, and so Brittany Keno, Senior Director of Community Workforce Solutions and Initiatives with Edna Martin Christian Center. How did I get here? I've been working in nonprofit management, specifically workforce development, adult education, for about the last 12 years. I think it was, what really called me to the space was my own upbringing. I was a non-traditional student from the very beginning. Life happened to me as a young person. And so I saw firsthand what happens when you just don't have access to those resources. You don't have maybe the correct parenting, or you live in areas that, where you lack the basic needs, So for me, it was important to talk about and to be good and do well at something that I knew a lot about firsthand, something naturally. And so I could have said, I want to get far away from anything that has to do with folks in poverty or people suffering. I just want to take care of myself and go. But that just didn't feel satisfying and content. I wasn't content with that choice. And so I pulled myself up many times. I spent a lot of time in my faith, making sure that I was okay and that I was creating a life for my family. And it only felt right for me to continue to do that for other people. And so people have poured into me over the years. And I think it's those relationships, especially Don said, those people you meet that really have that impact and can change your life. And so I've decided to be one of those people that people meet, and hopefully I can change the trajectory of their lives.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Edna Martin Christian Center?
Yeah, absolutely. Edna Martin Christian Center is about 84 years old now. We're approaching that 85th year. And so Miss Edna Martin started this as a one-room childcare. We're talking just a few kids in a one-room space, and about 85 years ago. And it just grew. Her passion to serve the community in that area, in that Martindale, Brightwood area, grew. And so she began to work with the local churches and to figure out different ways to help and bring the community together. And so with that vision and that passion and the support of the local church, Edna Martin grew. And so it was Edna Martin Christian Center. And so we are a full service community center that serves children 6 weeks, because we do have an on-site child care, early childhood education center, all the way to our seniors, who we offer senior programming on site for those folks. And everybody in the middle. A lot of what I do is the workforce development pieces, which is not just getting people jobs, but really teaching wealth building, because that is what's transformative for people. There are, various transactional exercises, from taking a class or, writing a resume or getting better at your interview skills. But the transformation happens is when we really give people access to the education for wealth building, and they can change their lives, not only for themselves, but their families.
So Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself and also Shepherd Community.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here today. I'm Andrew Green. I'm the Assistant Executive Director at Shepherd Community Center. And I've been there about 20 years now. And actually, kind of a neat way, God, I feel like, just shaped kind of my passion and calling from early on, just a passion for working with at-risk youth. And folks who are feeling down and out and maybe overlooked. And I've just felt like God has continued to develop that in me, and had the opportunity. I'm from Michigan originally, and was at the time, about 20 years ago, finishing my master's, and my dad's roommate from college was on the board of Shepherd, and they happened to be talking, and he was sharing about what I was passionate about at the time. And he said, "Oh, I know a great guy who runs a ministry in Indianapolis, Jay. You should reach out and connect to him." And so I did, and God really just opened the door and created an opportunity for my wife and I, just the two of us at that time, to come to Indy. So we moved after my master's, moved to the east side of Indy, and became a part of Shepherd, and just have been able to kind of live out that calling and continue to feel called to that work on the Near East Side. And since then, my wife and I, we have 4 boys and a 5th little guy staying with us right now as well. But we've got a freshman at Taylor, we've got a sophomore at Heritage, a middle schooler at the Oaks Middle School, and a elementary student at Oaks Brookside, and then our extra guy right now is at Shepherd in school. So all over the place, but really love what I get to be a part of at Shepherd. So if you're not familiar, Shepherd, not as long as Edna Martin, but has been around. We're celebrating 40 years actually this year. So 40 years on the east side. And when I started, Don and I were connecting just before this about the fact that he remembers the old Shepherd, which was at the corner estate in Washington. And that's where I got to be six months there at the old Shepherd, which was 100-year-old church connected to an old used car dealership. And then we moved to where we're at now, just a little farther east. But just love what we get to be a part of. We're working with kids and families on the Near East Side, helping to break the cycle of poverty. And so have appreciated our partnership with Edna Martin over the years in a lot of different ways, and we're excited to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, we're looking forward to that. You mentioned the East Side, but help our audience understand you're in 2 different zip codes, your centers, but they're adjacent to one another. Tell us exactly where you are and our thesis behind bringing you two as partners together to form a critical mass of love, faith-driven love into one region, not breaking things up in neighbors. So explain where you are and how that geographic proximity to one another has really been helpful and impactful for you.
Yeah, I think first, obviously the proximity of, right? So Edna Martin is 25th and Keystone area. We've expanded down to a second campus that we share with Kipp High School. And so they're positioned in an area. Quick history. I just love it because it's all workforce development here. Back in about when the railroad was happening, there's a railroad that runs right through that area, the Martindale Brightwood area, and it's right off the Monon, right? So we've seen a lot of redevelopment, great parks. The Frederick Douglass Park is there, and then the JTV Hill Park is on the other side of Dr. Andrew J. Brown. Well, the railroad used to run through there, and it brought a lot of jobs and families to that area. But then the highway opened up. And then the railroads transitioned to driving. And so during that process, that economic status of that area began to decline over time. And those families that were working in there began to leave to where there were better jobs at geographically. And so here we are in this area that now has a lot of devastation because families have left, businesses have left, and that has increased over time, crime and access to, food and other resources during this period of time. So Edna Martin began to nestle into that space of saying, hey, we are the community center for this area, Martindale, Brightwood, so that we can serve what has happened in this space, and we can respond to that call. And I think how that relates to Shepherd is they have their own very rich story and history in that space, and we're just kind of butting up against each other so that we can work and collaborate. And spaces like this with Citizen 7 have been extremely helpful for us to be able to get in the same room and not compete, but really say, what can we do together? And
so Andrew, what's your area?
Yeah, so Shepherd is, we're on Washington Street, on the south side of Washington Street between Sherman and Emerson, and really focusing on the 46201 and 46203 zip codes. So the 203 zip code is kind of to the south of us, the 201 is to the north of us, and then 46218, where Martindale Brightwood is really kind of to the northwest of us, just a little bit. So I think one of the neat things about historically, too, is that let's see, it was probably 2012 or so, and a neat partnership piece of our stories together is that Shepherd merged with a ministry called Gyra Sports, which is in the Martindale Brightwood neighborhood, and we worked together for a number of years on that, and then determined, for kind of some of these reasons that we've been talking about already, which is there's such a great history of Edna Martin in that community, and there wasn't of Shepherd. And so one of the most significant ways we worked together over the years is that Shepherd gifted that property at 25th and Ralston, where the KIPP school is and your expanded services, to Edna Martin. And so at that time, it was an opportunity to say, you guys have the history and the relationships in this community and the trust of this community way more than Shepherd did at that point either. And so it was just really neat to see that happen from between organizations to say, like, let's continue to work together. But it is specific. You have a lot of trust built in that neighborhood from a huge history.
So let's just dive right into this whole workforce thing. I was on the Private Industry Council. I'm familiar with some workforce program. Seems to me that word is, hey, the government should be doing that. And I guess I'm interested to know, why would people of faith not say, hey, why should we care about workforce development?
Well, I think it is the basis to self-improvement, financial freedom. The concept of workforce is to have a job. Where are the jobs? Do I have access to those jobs? So workforce talks about where are the economic connections to the people and business in our areas. Specifically, if there are no jobs in Martindale Brightwood, where are the jobs and how do we get those families connected to those jobs? And so that broader system says there's some advocacy that needs to happen, some education, and some resource alignment that can help. So I think that's where it connects with faith, is because if we have to be the ones that make the connection for the people in a big world of economics that one may not understand. So if they're not connected, then they're just lost.
Andrew, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I would add workforce development. When we think about breaking cycles of poverty, it's really all encompassing. We see poverty impact every area of somebody's life. So spiritual, physical, emotional, academic, every area. And I think sometimes from the outside, we could easily look at somebody's life and say, oh, all they need is X, or all they need is Y, or all they need is, we think we know what might solve poverty for a person. And we've continued to discover just how complex poverty is and how all of those pieces are so interrelated. So when I think about workforce development, and I think about, to your point, Brittany, self-sufficiency and creating an upward stability for a family, that's a huge part of it, is having work to be able to have income, to be able to meet financial needs. But it's only one aspect of a much bigger picture when you think of breaking cycles of poverty for a family, but a really important one.
Yeah, there's some spaces of having a job can make you feel whole. They talk about, a lot of times we reference in my faith in the word that Adam had a job. He named the plants, the animals, or whatever the case. Having a job gives you a sense of self and confidence, a mission, something to wake up and strive for every day. And in that process of waking up and showing up, something happens, a transformation begins to happen in a person.
To that point, why don't you all describe a typical neighbor that you're in relationship with, and relative to workforce development, what's been their status in life? Where are they? And what have you done through this allocation of funds to sort of bring them along to the few that you're working with now? So just describe that for our audience.
That was going to be my question. Like, what does that story look like? Because I don't quite connect with what you're saying. I want to hear what that experience is for the people that you work with on a daily basis.
What we see often is a person who will come to the community center and ask for assistance, maybe with rental assistance, or, I have this housing stability need. And we'll talk to them, and through discovery, we find that they're underemployed, they're just not making enough money, or they're unemployed. And so even if we help you this time, if we pay the rent or we pay the disconnect notice on the lights, what are you going to do moving forward? How are you going to get out of this cycle? And so a lot of times that's what it looks like when they come. And so they get routed to workforce development to help to get those job supports. It may also look like a person who says, I didn't have the best education. I left school early. I got pregnant. I had a family. I had other things, or I've been incarcerated. I made some bad choices, and now I'm here trying to get myself together. No one will hire me. I don't have the skills to be hired. I've done fast food. I'm, in my late 30s, and I want something more fulfilling for myself. Those are some of the cases that we see quite often, and I would think it's probably similar, where it's a lack of funds, a lack of education, or a lack of access to things that will make you, feel better about yourself or improve your living conditions.
Andrew, how about, can you just say just their first name, but could you give us, a story about somebody that's benefited from the barrier busting fund?
Yeah, I think about, first, just real quick, I think about, he hasn't been involved in the Barrier Buster Fund yet, but a young man that I have been mentoring for a little while, and I think about what you just described, Brittany, and exactly some of those cycles that he's continued on, unfortunately, so far, but the incarceration piece and coming out of there, and he's been having a mindset of very tyranny of the urgent kind of mindset, which is a survival mindset, really. And so he's been getting a job when he needs some money. Gets a job, gets some money, loses the job. Makes it for a little while in a lot of different ways, survives in a lot of different ways. Time to get another job. As we check in, we connect. It's, I've got a job right now, but in my mind, I'm thinking, I hope this is one that turns into a better job and a career, like that kind of track. But he hasn't had that in his life yet. So I think of that one immediately. But then I think where we're bringing barrier busters along in some of these situations is to think about even for younger folks. So that's, Brittany kind of described a typical folk for a lot of us. But also we've had some experiences with some younger folks who have an interest in a particular area, and we've used some barrier buster dollars related to auto mechanics. So that's an example of, it's a great kind of long-term career, long-term trajectory. We've worked with a particular provider on the east side who's worked with us in that. So we've helped provide tools through this program so that they can go on and get additional certifications, and it ends up in a long-term opportunity for them. Now, the guy that I'm thinking of particularly ended up moving on from that to another great career. So in his case, he went from career to career, but it was still that step in there that where someone walks alongside, provides for a monetary need in some cases, and helps make that next step into career.
And with that allocation for the tools that you gave them, what's the expectation on their end to paying it back and forward?
Yeah, we've had the approach that we've taken with our first two rounds that we've done is that we've done it in a form of a loan. And so the idea is that folks are paying that back in some way. We've done that in volunteering or in a financial payback. And so we've thought of it from that perspective of they have something to give back. So I think of one lady who we provided a small loan to, and then she volunteered she actually had some expertise in taxes. And so we provide tax support in that season of the year. And so she volunteered and gave back in that way. So we think of it from kind of both of those perspectives. You have something to give back. And I think that's another really important part of breaking cycles of poverty is you have something to give back and embracing that.
And Brittany, you've approached that a bit differently, but it's not been a handout.
Yeah.
It hasn't even been, it's a hand up, but it's really a hand with as you partner with them. So explain your thesis there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we offer a variety of training programs and, to get folks ready to get into these careers, a lot of contextualized learning. And part of that includes like job readiness. And for us, what's been really big is the medical careers, because they do provide a very tangible ABC pathway. And so you can get in and get a job in the medical field, but if you continue to learn and have experience, you can really grow. So specifically, like a CNA license would be, a certified nursing assistant would be a job or a B job, and then you could move forward to an LPN or RN and have that career level job. So what we do is send them through training, and if you complete, so you've done all the things that you need to do, as soon as you get an offer letter, we're going to send you a stipend out of the barrier busting fund. And what we hope that does is to give you gas money to get there those first. If you've been without a job, you probably don't have a ton of extra funds.
Right.
We don't want people having to, mess up. That first 30 days is so critical. And so we're hoping that can take over, that pending utility bill that you may have. And so the amount typically changes, but it's most times around $300. So offer letter, we send $300. We hope that will carry you to your first paycheck.
So Greg, you've been the administrator, the overseer of this fund. What has surprised you about it, and where do you see kind of the small wins?
Well, I alluded to this. Oftentimes people are thinking, hey, if not-for-profit social service, it's handouts. And we were emphatic, this ain't going to be a handout. But with that, we learned some lessons along the way. Not everyone who got that initial allocation of money has been a success story. And so that was an eye-opening thing to me, is you just don't walk in as do-gooders and you say, we're going to do good and we're going to have 100% success. No, we have learned as we've gone through this. So that was very enlightening to me. In fact, I'd like to take that, maybe share one of the maybe harder lessons that we've learned as we've gone through this 2-year journey now.
Yeah. You got one?
Yeah, I think I love here in this context too, where we're talking about relationships here in this room, but we're talking about relationships with neighbors in this Barrier Buster Fund as well. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we continue to learn is how do we let the relationship drive all aspects of it. So if someone just walks in and the first thing we do is offer money to meet their need, I can almost guarantee you that it's not going to last and we probably won't see them much.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of our continued learnings is we're not going to lead with money. We want to lead with relationship. And so sometimes that's very different because, Don, you mentioned earlier the government, and I think that's a typical government approach is it's transactional. It's about a monetary giving of something, a handout. So some of those key things we're going to be, and we're finding transformational when it's about relationship. And so we continue, even in these different phases that we've walked through with barrier busting, is that we're talking about, okay, we're going to offer this number of loans. Okay, that round 2, we're going to do loans in a little different way. Round 3, we're going to invite folks into it's called work life, and it's a class, and we're going to be in relationship together for a period of time, and it's going to be a smaller number, and we're going to look at how do we provide funds that will help you move to your next goal. And so I think those are some of the key things that we've been learning in the process.
Yeah. We tried a new, round 2, or 3, we tried to do something different with the early childhood pilot program, getting more teachers, using that as a career pathway, right? So similar how we did with healthcare, breaking down the ABC points and how we could do that. And, it was doing well, everything was doing great. And then what happens? and this happens in workforce all the time, there are things that are just out of our control. The child care centers, early childhood education in Indiana gets hit with massive funding, recalls, and so they don't have the funds anymore. And so you have centers that are closing. Jobs that were once like, they need folks. Now they're not needing as many people because the CDF fund has changed so much. So that is a learning that we can try and prepare for as many unique and innovative workforce programs. But sometimes there are things that are outside of our control that really hijack those plans and derail. Now, we're still seeing some success in that space, but with that change, it's been challenging.
So I'm sitting in the...
Hey, Don.
Yeah.
I was going to keep answering your question. Do you have a new question? Okay. Just so one more learning, Don, that was a great question, is now that these centers are working together, I've been surprised at how excited Mike Bowling is with Josh Livingston. And so now cultivating communities, you'll hear more about them later. They've bolted on. They were excited about what was happening here. And now Ron Nunes and is it Armand? Yeah.
Armand.
With the Eastside Youth Initiative. So now there's 2 other initiatives. In our last meeting, I was so thrilled that these guys are all sharing with one another. And now this is going to even proceed even larger in the years to come as others have started saying there's something special about what's going here. So I just want to make sure I shared that as far as what really surprised me is how excited people are that this is growing slowly, but animating a broader conversation.
Yeah.
Normally when I describe Greg, who is a PhD biostatistician from Eli Lilly, I normally don't include the word clueless. But truly, Greg, I think you and I were both completely clueless as to what this barrier busting fund, how it's going to work, how these guys going to do administering it. Is it really going to make a difference? I guess my question is, how do we allow experimentation or creativity so that people that are donors say, you know what, we don't know, but, we've solved some other problems and we're going to wade into this, not because we know exactly how to do it, but we're going to figure it out. Yeah. So I guess I guess maybe that comes to you, Greg.
Yep. Well,
maybe
Chris,
I just want to kind of clarify. Let me. I don't want to answer it.
I'm going to answer it.
Okay, good, because I want some clarity. So essentially, Don and Greg, you came and said, "Look, let's get together a pot of money, and then figure out a way to help people who are in need. Let's go to Shepherd and Edna Martin, have them administer, or when somebody walks into the center and says, "I need help with my rent," you're saying, well, why don't you have money for rent? Well, I can't find a job. Well, let's help you find a job. And oh, by the way, we've got, I would imagine transportation's like number one, right? If you live in Martindale, Brightwood, trying to get to the job is incredibly hard, or utilities. And so then this process kicked off with you four essentially working together to make that fund happen. It's been administered for 2 years, and now you're looking to expand. Do I have all that kind of correct in terms, just to summarize for the listeners?
Yes.
Because I didn't know anything about the fund, so I'm sort of like the listener here going, all right, I want to make sure I get it too.
We're looking at the opportunity to expand. In fact, to answer Don's question, and you've alluded to it here, a former mayor of our fair city and I just had breakfast together. Out of the blue, someone connected me with him and heard about this fund. Here is a mayor of Indianapolis who's looking for good execution against money, knowing that it's relationships that precede allocation of dollars to make this city thrive. And so we had a great breakfast, and he right now is very interested in this conversation about what's going on. So I just wanted to say, we don't know if this is going to go anywhere beyond what they're already doing, but there's a lot of momentum, and I certainly would like to help be a part of catalyzing whatever God has for us now. But there's different interested parties saying, we think there's something here that we can grow to help Indianapolis out more broadly. So with that, though, what What would you say would be some of your vision for the future? What lessons have you learned most recently from phase 3? And what might we do moving forward, if anything?
I've been really excited about, and Greg, you were just mentioning it, in the last few meetings that we've been having, these quarterly meetings where we get together, we've brought some new faces to the table. You have, and we've just been encouraging that to happen. So cultivating communities as they look across, I think 7 churches was their initial number across the city.
With workforce development happening, not just normal church activity, but real workforce development going on.
Yeah, and they were the ones who kind of simultaneous with us were both looking at work-life curriculum and training folks as we went, and they've come to some of our classes to see ideas for their churches and how that could expand. But I think that's been really exciting, and I think the Eastside Youth Collaborative that you mentioned with Ron and Curtis and a number of churches getting together on the East Side specifically to think about what does this look like from a youth perspective. And I think that's a couple of the areas I've been most excited about is church involvement and the youth perspective, and how can we start talking about these things at an even earlier age and create community for the youth across the East Side, and really to think about it from less about programs. And I think that's what we've been able to do is we're talking relationships. So it's not going to matter if they connect with Edna Martin or they connect with this church or they connect with Shepherd. We don't want it to be about programs. We want it to be focused on the neighbor. So focused on the youth, focused on the neighbor, not about the program. And I think there's just a ton of opportunity with that as we continue to work together and take that perspective and that approach forward.
That's beautiful. Brittany?
I love that. I think there's a lot to be said and celebrated in that sharing. What I think about the last 2 years, what we did really well the first time and the second time worked well. And I really like that model of, you put some skin in the game and then you get that hand up. And I want to continue that, but I want to take it a step further. If we're looking into the future of what that looks like, leaning into the financial wellness of people and saying, okay, you got the job, but do you really know what to do with the paycheck?
Mm-hmm.
And, leaning into creating that generational wealth so that we're actually making change and transformation in people's lives. And so I would like to see the next step of that. And I know the curriculum has that financial element in there as well. And so really diving into that in that space of what's after the paycheck. That's workforce.
Right.
What's after that?
So I've made the mistake over a number of years of assuming that, you know what, I got all the answers and I just need to go give it to the people, right? Which is completely wrong. So in terms of learning from people that have barriers, the people that are developing their muscle of resilience, what would you offer to the listeners of, I think this is, or that strengthening of relationship and community? I think that my neighborhood is probably the most isolated I've ever been. Some because they're all physicians and they're all working and nobody relates to anybody. I just talked to somebody, a really good friend of mine that said, he said 80% of wealth is negative because I can buy everything. I don't need anybody. I don't need anything. I guess maybe give us some, as you're talking to the audience here, what are some things that we can learn from the people that you're serving that are really some of the champions of our community?
I would say that it's a privilege to feel safe in your home and to know where your next meal is coming from. Mm-hmm. Some things that we may take for granted that some people and a lot of people that we interact with on a regular basis don't have that comfort, especially the youth, which is probably the most heartbreaking. They don't have the comfort of a support system or, again, knowing where that food is coming from or being safe in my neighborhood or being able, as talking to, Andrew when we were walking up, and I was admiring how walkable this neighborhood was, and people were walking their dogs and going to different places, and everyone doesn't have that that comfort, and so it would be good, and I would love the listeners to know that if we can share that comfort in the best ways we know how, time, talent, or treasure, then I think we should.
I think the other thing, Don, standing out to me, that loneliness, that epidemic of loneliness, it transcends all the age groups, all the communities, and I think we've lost relationship and community, and so I think that's what I continue to see in neighbors and hear from neighbors, whether they articulate it that way or not, is that we need those connections with each other. So that's with neighbors on neighbors, with churches, with other organizations. It's just continues to be highlighted to me that is the direction that we need to continue to push into in any sort of program or approach. Is it's got to be focused on that, and it's got to address loneliness.
Wow.
I've got a question. So if you're listening later, watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast feed, first of all, thank you. Please share it with your friends. But you can watch this live on the last Monday, the fourth Monday of every month. Join the email list over at Citizens 7's website. But Joshua Crawford is watching live and has a question for you both. When serving people in your communities, what time commitment buy-in do you like to see before providing the individual with barrier-busting funds?
So I could speak to this last phase particularly that we've been doing. So the work-life class is a 13-week curriculum. So we're not giving out any funds unless somebody's joining us in those conversations and walking through that with us. And so again, when I was talking about not leading with money, that's an example of that. We want to build connection, and we want to be in this together and see that kind of commitment before we move forward and help try to support somebody in that next step, because we know that relationship-wise, it's going to have to go beyond that if they're going to be successful in moving into that kind of longer-term career.
And for us at Edna Martin, we have a 2 weeks foundations course that you must take. We do deploy some transportation stipends like a bus pass or maybe even a gas card so that you can get there during that time. But you have to at least complete foundations, which is 2 weeks, and then get a job offer. But the good thing is when you are working with foundations, that's when your career coaching starts. So you're meeting with someone, applying for jobs, helping, with your resume. But we do like to deploy Citizen 7 funds, that barrier busting, after the offer letter.
Very good.
Can I ask, in these classes, what are some things that you teach people that I might take for granted? What do these classes entail, and what do people really need to understand that you found in your experience?
The first class, it's always the first one, is Mindset Matters. It is my absolute favorite. It's really tackling fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Where am I? Who am I in this world, and how am I viewing it? We try to really drill down there first before we start doing any of the other essential skill building, which could be professional communication, some more of those types, time management. That's a big one in these spaces. And it goes down to your personal branding. How am I showing up in this world, and how am I being represented? To more of the technical, like how to write a resume, how to have a successful interview.
Same as Edna Martin, we're taking the same approach, and those are often a lot more about soft skills than about writing a resume. That's a piece of it. The financial side of it, that's a piece of it, but it's really more about a mindset shift that happens for folks, and I think that's where a lot of the time goes in those classes, is talking about that.
Andrew, would you say that's where we build a lot of relationship?
Yeah,
I love the
absolutely.
Mindset Matters classes.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Getting people to trust you and to build that relationship. A lot of love happens in that time period.
We've started with Citizen 7 book discussion club. We think that we can have all these meetups in the world, but it's the small groups. It's kind of life on life, people spending time together on that. You're kind of a relationship expert, Andrew. If you were living in the suburbs and you had a white collar job or something, what are some action steps to help create community, eliminate some isolation? What would you just moved there? What's the first thing you do in the first 30 days?
I think of it in a couple of different ways. I think of it immediately with your neighbors right there. So I think it's, kind of a lost art of connecting and community, but being able to just go over to your neighbor and connect with them. So I think starting with your immediate community and what that looks like. But then I would think about where are you going to plug in and give of your time? And I think sometimes people are intimidated thinking, oh, I don't know, in our cases, I don't know what it's like to go and serve in the inner city. And I wouldn't be good at that, or I don't have anything to offer. And I think what is really important is that it's really just all about the time when it's a relationship. That's come up a number of times today in our conversation. But it is as simple as, for instance, we have a lot of staff at Tech High School. So it's as simple as coming to Tech and sitting at lunch with kids to start a relationship. It's as simple as being at Shepherd to help with homework once a week. Those are really easy ways to connect and plug in. So I would encourage people to plug in somewhere in a relational context. And sometimes it means there's some sort of programmatic element to it that helps create relationship, like tutoring or something like that. But it's really about giving up a little bit of time and making a connection with somebody and doing it over and over and over and over again.
Just to follow up on that, I was thinking, because God is love and Jesus is God incarnate, but he left this planet and gave us his spirit. So we are the body of Christ, and, God lives in us by his spirit. Where is God? Where is Jesus showing up in your neighborhoods? You mentioned at the high school, but how about in the neighborhoods, in the streets and the homes? What glimmers of hope do you have that Jesus is, through the power of the gospel and his redemptive call to draw all men and women, boys and girls to himself? Where are you seeing that show up in the neighbors that you've already maybe thought about as we've conversed here, or beyond on some of the streets and neighborhoods that you serve in?
One of the most powerful places that I see that take place is when we come together for a class. I call it a community within a community. If I present the right atmosphere, add a couple elements, maybe some coffee, I don't know, maybe a donut, and just give a platform for folks to come in. These neighbors or community, the people in Martindale, Brightwood, they get together, and it's fast friends, and it's so beautiful to see that these people may have not known each other, but by the end of the 2 weeks, they are connected. They know each other. They're helping out. They're giving each other a ride. They're saying, hey, this place is hiring, and they build these. So every time we create a classroom for workforce development or that space, I find it really beautiful that people who have maybe nothing to, one would assume nothing to offer, they offer themselves to one another. It's presence, being in the moment with each other and saying, hey, I'm here. Or when they share their story or they give an example, they're piggybacking and supporting what they're saying. And so I enjoy that space, and I don't interrupt. I am there to curate and I get to witness. And it's such a privilege to witness people who may be facing so many things, eviction, not having certain things, no hope because I'm on an ankle monitor for a crime that I did some years ago. But somehow, some way, they can get in that classroom and commune and be friends and be neighborly and be love.
Wow.
Love
Andrew?
that.
Andrew, you're having church.
Sorry.
No, we're all enjoying it.
Yeah.
Andrew,
I love that.
any way Jesus is showing up in your neighborhoods this way?
Yeah, the couple of ways that immediately come to mind are with the youth, actually, which I'm just really excited about. I think about through that Eastside Youth Collaborative about a month or so ago, they hosted a youth night, and this was multiple churches on the East Side coming together, and over 75 youth coming together to enjoy each other's company, hang out, have fun, have a safe place, a few of the things you mentioned. And I just think I'm really excited about that sort of collaboration amongst churches, but most importantly, just for kids to have something to be a part of. And we're also seeing that another one that it was standing out was in the school and at Tech High School. Actually, there's some opportunities for us. Some of our staff are doing some mental health, offering some mental health resources in a reset room, and thinking about this one girl who came and didn't want anything to do with any of that, didn't want anything to do with staff, didn't just bringing a lot of her own background and her own trauma over a course of about the last 2 or 3 years, just continued folks being persistent in her life and showing up in various ways at school. And just in this last couple of months, she ended up just giving her life to the Lord and getting baptized. And she was a part of our summer youth employment that happened. And now she's serving at Shepherd, working with the kids, working with the youth in our after school program. And I just think about how God used a lot of different people investing in her life to make a really significant change for her. And those types of stories just get me excited about what God's doing on the Near East Side.
It's beautiful.
That is.
So before we wrap up, I'll ask each of you, what is the thing that you see every day that you wish everybody could see, that could understand about your work, that would change their perception of people that you work with?
I think it's assumed that, we come to the table with all of the same opportunities and capabilities and it's just get a job. But there's so many things, and going back to that foundations class, there's so many things that shapes a person's mind before they even get to that point. A lot of things that they didn't have control over. So we look at the person, this adult, many times that may have that now has control, that says, "Yep, I'm responsible for me." But there was so much that happened when someone else was supposed to be responsible for them, or that they shouldn't have been on the hook for, if you will, that really has these lived experiences, how they really can do a lot of damage to the thought process and to the mindset. And, living in survival mode year after year. And I speak from that place as a person who finds themselves comfortable and having some of those, privileges that we talked about earlier. I still, because it's a mindset thing, survival mode is real, and it really can disrupt and distract people from doing what other people think is, normal or status quo. Just do this. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people really can't, from things that they cannot control. And so by the time it is time for them to control it, they're dealing with 10 times the amount that somebody else may be dealing with.
It's powerful. Andrew?
Something similar along those lines actually is what I was thinking as well. And someone told me once that people make decisions for really good reasons. And it seemed like a simple quote, but I keep coming back to it over and over again, and right in line with what you were saying, Brittany, and just thinking about, we can look in from the outside and say, why would you ever do that? Why would you make that choice? And why would you do this with your kids? Or why would you do that? And I think mindset and background and all those different things, that person, that neighbor is making a decision in that moment, likely out of a survival mindset that is, in their mind, the best choice that they can make right then. And I think just understanding that and thinking from that perspective has really changed outlook and kind of how do you move into relationship and talk about those sorts of things with folks and with our neighbors has helped me, and I think can kind of help us all engage in a relationship, whatever relationship that is.
So how can they give to the fund? What's the future of the fund? I know they can give individually to Shepherd and Edna Martin. How can people listening help?
We haven't kicked off a new barrier busting fund yet. We're at the end of that. We are thinking we have a couple $1,000s out of that 100+ that we're dreaming and planning a summit next year to invite city leaders and others from the community together into a summit to not only hear these stories from Brittany and Andrew, but to meet some of the folks that have been blessed through it. And so that's on the docket right now to welcome people. And by that time, Chris, I'm hoping that we have some next steps planned and be able to actually offer something to the community.
Yeah, that's perfect. Because I was literally listening. Okay, they work on 2 different zip codes, but there's a lot of zip codes in Indianapolis. How do you expand it? And that's great. So, Brittany, Andrew, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We've learned a lot from both of you. We appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you. Thank you, Don and Greg, for your leadership and for putting this together and just being a great example always. And thank you, listener, for joining us here on the Citizen 7 podcast. Please share this with your friends. Show the good work that the Lord is doing here in Indianapolis and inspire people to be a part of it. That's a great way that you can help just right off the bat. It's simple. Get on LinkedIn, get on Facebook. Just share this and say, hey, there's some good work being done. It's not all bad out there. Goodness spreads too. All right. We've got a lot of darkness spreading. Light can spread too, as long as we go out there and promote it. So thank you, everybody, for listening here on Big Hearted Indy.